Recognized.
Who spoke here before me? I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in opposition to this bill and adopt many of the premises that my friend Mr. Walz adopted. I also adopt the premise of Dr. Rowe, who is a really dear friend of mine, that Tim Walz is the kind of guy you wouldn't mind riding across the country with. And that's because he's honest, he's knowledgeable, and he's sincere. And frankly, I attribute all those same characteristics to Dr. Rowe. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. Everybody on this floor agrees that our veterans deserve the best care possible. There's no debate about that. All of us in this House are focused on that goal. But this bill does nothing to meet this goal, in my view. This bill is part of, and I do not ascribe it to Dr. Rowe, but a significantly long history of a partisan effort to scapegoat federal civil servants that's been going on for decades, long before Dr. Rowe got in it or Mr. Walz got in. It's a follow-on to the dangerous hiring freeze, frankly, that the Trump administration imposed in January, and the repeated attempts over the last several years to extract more and more cuts from federal employees' pay and benefits, which contributed over $150 billion in cuts in pay and benefits over the last 6 years, stripping away the rights of VA employees to work in a nonpartisan, professional environment will not improve the care of our veterans, and their families deserve and expect from the VA medical system. This bill, in my view, would undermine the collective bargaining rights. I'm a very strong supporter of collective bargaining rights. Employees serving as doctors, nurses, physical therapists, and others in critical jobs. And it will disrupt the collaborative relationship between VA managers and employees that is essential to a successful workplace environment. Many years ago, almost 100 years ago, we adopted a civil service system. The premise of that system is we ought to have professional employees, not political employees, not political appointees, not subject to change because of the political winds that may be blowing one way or the other. This bill risks demoralizing those who have tirelessly been working to help our veterans reintegrate into civilian life in communities across. Now, let me make it clear, and I'm sure Dr. Rowe is not surprised when I say this, that I agree with Mr. Walz. If there is an employee who is not performing well, that employee ought not to be kept on. But this bill removes the process that was negotiated or could be negotiated in a collective bargaining way. And if, by the way, it takes 300+ days, then perhaps this legislation could deal with that to shorten it. There are ways that this can be dealt with that, in my view, will not undermine the civil service protections that are important not only for the employees but for the system itself. I have no doubt there are measures that can be adopted to improve VA performance and effectively and fairly discipline employees who engage in misconduct. We ought not to tolerate that. But this bill does not include them. I have not read Senator Isaacson's bill, but perhaps that is closer, and I look forward to reviewing it with both the chairman and the ranking member. This bill goes too far, shreds basic due process rights, in my view, and punishes even model employees. And let me say as an aside, when I say undermines basic due process rights, part of those rights are to have some time to get representation, to thoughtfully respond, to have some discovery as to what is going on here, what is being alleged, why is it being alleged, who's alleging it. This bill eviscerates that in some respects. I'm proud to represent 62,000 federal employees in Maryland's 5th District, including many who work at the VA's clinic in Charlotte Hall and in Camp Springs in the neighboring 4th District. We ought to remember, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, that when we undermine our federal workforce and our ability to recruit and retain the best and brightest, we undermine our government's ability to serve the American people. So this is not just about present employees. It's about those who might consider employment in the future. Mr. Chairman, I hope we don't make the mistake of, in effect, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not take away the rights and protection of those who serve us so ably. But yes, I agree with Dr. Rowe and with Ranking Member Walz. If there are those who are not serving us well, yes, there ought to be a process. It ought to be fair. It ought to provide time in which to respond, not interminable time, so that we can have an agency of which we can be proud and does what we all want, serve our veterans in a way that we would expect, demand, and that we are morally obligated to give. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Walz reserves his time. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also during that live Facebook page, I mentioned another person I wouldn't mind riding across the country with, and it was Mr. Hoyer. So just to clarify the record.